This happened in elementary school to one of my friends, which we'll call her by the name Brittany. Brittany was about 13 at the time of this story, and of course, she went with a couple of her friends named Crystal, Amber, Burr, Jake, and Josh. Now, these a bunch of Brittany's friends, used to love going around places. However, this summer camp this year, which of course it was for teenagers, it was a very nice place with people doing like hiking, swimming, etc. However, Brittany, as well as her friends, Crystal, Amber, Jake, and Josh, were all playing in a game by the river. However, Josh decided that they should go for a hike in the woods, and they asked the camp counselor if it'd be okay, and they said it'd be fine as long as they come back. Now, of course, that's when Crystal and Amber, along with Jake and even Brittany, they went into the forest as they decided to have a little bit of a hike. Of course, they didn't go too far as they didn't want to be too far away from where the campers as well as the counselors cannot see them. While going out as far as they could, they all of a sudden heard a roaring sound. It came from deep in the woods, to which they had no idea what it was. Although Brittany, as well as the others, were kind of confused and scared. They came to a conclusion that it could have been a bear, a mountain lion, or whatever it was, but they couldn't see where it came from or what was there. However, though, that was when they heard what sounded like a tree being snapped in two. Honestly, that was when Amber thought that it could have been a bear, but they had no idea where it came from, and no bear was strong enough to destroy a tree that had big. It sounded like it was a large tree. They all decided to run back towards the camp, and they ended up getting back there again, worried and fear. Once Brittany and her friends got back to the camp, they told the camp counselors about what happened, but the counselors were mildly dismissive. All they decided to stay inside for the rest of the day and the night to talk about what transpired the following morning. However, the following morning, though, the campers couldn't believe their eyes when they arrived at the campsite that morning. They saw some of the woods from the distance. Trees were knocked down, branches were broken, and a giant footprint were scattered along the whole scene. The group wasn't certain about the existence of some sort of creature or animal, but they had no indication of who or what it was. After that day, not much was ever found about the creature. Of course, they never went back deep in the woods alone and made sure to be back at the camp before sun had set. All those years, the camp folklore of the woods have been one of the best stories to tell around the campfire. But this still was a traumatic experience for Brittany and her friends. They still don't know to this day who it was or what it was in those woods that knocked down the trees, but this is definitely an experience that Brittany will never forget. However, she does not know that whoever it was still there. She doesn't even know if that creature was still been there or not. But as far as she knows, no one has ever discovered what it was. As far as she's concerned, she doesn't ever plan to go back to that camp again. It still frightens her, even though it's been about 12 years. She still gets shivers to this day when she thinks about it. Now, I would like to point out that this happened to a friend of mine who was friends with a couple of my other friends, and this was sometime in around 2002. Daphne was only 10 years old at the time of this story, and she had loved going to summer camp since the 90s. She was around 10 years old in 2002 when this happened, but had already grown to love the summer camp experience over the years as doing that as a kid. All the sincerity of nature, physical activities, socialization, and most of all, the mysteries of the lake. All the summer kids have been daring to each other to cross the lake, and the tip of the toes what called the uncrossable waters. However, they really are curious as to what some stuff they would do. Of course, some of the kids did get into mischief, but that's just besides the point. However, though, Brittany as well, had teased Daphne a few times, but Daphne basically just ignored her, since she was just wanting attention, and she was not getting it. However, during the camps, Daphne was making a craft when she was hearing rumors by a couple of boys saying about some sort of monster or something that lives by the lake. Of course, the boys did try to scare the girls by pretending to be the Loch Ness Monster of the lake just to tease them. However, Daphne knew it was them, so she didn't really bother. But she kind of wondered to herself, what were those boys talking about? It honestly was something they had no idea. However, it was early one morning, and Daphne woke up to take on the challenge, as well as trying to see if she could believe in the boys about this weird monster or whatever that was living in the water. She honestly didn't care if she got in trouble, but she wanted to see what it was. She looked at her clock to see that it was around 6 a.m. in the morning. Everything was still and peaceful. However, nobody gets up until around 7:30, between 7 and 7:30. That's when Daphne woke up, and he looked at the lake that was only maybe a couple minute walk away from her cabin. Once she gets out of the cabin, she walks over very closely, and she ended up placing one foot in the lake and then the other. The lake obviously felt cold in the water, but she didn't feel anything much. She then began to tread slowly forward. Of course, the water was up to her waist. She felt something unusual. She looked down to the surface of the lake, and it began to ripple and swell, which would happen to be about 15 or so feet. Whatever it was, honestly, was a really big creature. At this point, she thought that it could have been the boys maybe trying to prank her again, using that same Loch Ness Monster technique. But apparently, this was something Daphne was not falling for it. She looked in the distance, but she honestly could see that it looked as if it was, some sort of creature. Keep in mind, this was something she was not expecting, and whatever it was definitely some sort of animal. Honestly, she couldn't really tell, but whatever it was had its head up for a bit, but didn't seem to notice her before going back down. As soon as it went back down to the water, not to be seen again, that's when Daphne, in a little bit of a panic, ends up looking more closely at the creature when it popped out again. It had gray skin, long neck, and bright eyes that resemble the famous Loch Ness Monster. She rapidly retreated back to shore by slowly walking away, making sure to not be making notice. She honestly stopped to the beach in utter shock from the experience and instinctively looked back to the lake. But to her dismay, the creature was gone, but the lake was quiet now. The last time anyone has saw this creature was unknown. Of course, this is when Daphne ended up going back to her cabin, and as soon as she did, she ended up trying to read a book or something just so she could forget about what happened. Eventually, at breakfast time, the boys tried to tease her about it again, but of course she ignored them, didn't even pay attention. She didn't even bother to go tell anybody about what she saw at the lake, thinking she would get into trouble for being up that late. However, it's been so many years now, and Daphne is around her 30s. She's got 2 kids now who are attending summer camp. Nothing like this has ever happened since, but she still gets chills when she thinks about this, and this is why she doesn't attend overnight summer camps anymore. And of course, she only attended the day camps after this experience, but never an overnight camp again. And this experience has come to show you, you may think you saw something was real, when it may not seem real, like you fought. Keep in mind that upon of this story, this took place back in 2016. At the time of this story, was around pretty much 18 at the time, and this experience was actually a really creepy one. I am going to get more into this in a little bit, but I would like to point out that this isn't really the type of story to make you jump out of your pants, but it's definitely one that really creeped me out for a while. Now, I was about 18 at the time of this story, and it took place in 2016, where I attended a youth in action camp for people with disabilities. It was honestly a pretty fun camp. There was a lot of fun times, and there were a lot of other stuff that happened to be the case when it comes to a lot of stuff that happened. However, this was definitely one I really, really need to get out there. I may not remember much of it because it's been years, but I'll just give a little disclosure of what it looked like and etc. However, though, this was something that I really had no idea what it was or whatever I heard. It was around pretty much late at night. It was already lights out. I was in my tent all by myself, and I woke up feeling thirsty. I honestly thought that maybe I had enough water, and I did have a little bit of water left. So that was when I drank some. After I drank some water, I ended up deciding to go into that little big cabin house that was used for Girl Scouts to fill up my water and use the bathroom if I had to. So at this time, this was when I ended up looking over to see if there was anybody out there, but apparently there wasn't. Now, as I was heading towards the place, I was moving as slow as I can, trying not to wake up any of the other camp counselors or anyone else who were sleeping in the tents. As I got a little closer, I ended up getting to the door when all of a sudden I turned around and I ended up hearing what sounded like someone or something walking. I honestly knew it was dark and I couldn't see what it was or who it was. At first, I thought maybe it could have been a bear, but it didn't look anything like a bear. Honestly, this really unsettled me as I couldn't figure out who or what was there, but this was definitely something that really had me a bit on edge. I was nearly panicking on the inside, trying to think if I should just stay in there for the night or not. Eventually, I ended up seeing whatever it was took off, and I couldn't see anything due to how dark it was. Eventually, I ended up going to the bathroom, filling up my water, and I just went back to bed. I almost couldn't sleep. This honestly really had me a bit on edge, and I had no idea who or what was there. I stayed in that tent and didn't go to sleep for another 15-20 minutes. Eventually, I fell asleep and I woke up and everything seemed fine. However, though, I never told anybody about who or what it was that was making those sounds in the woods or who it was that was walking around. I don't even know if it was a wild animal, a person, or whatever. Honestly, I didn't even know where it came from, but I was lucky it wasn't anywhere near my campsite. But however, the sound of where it came from was probably about maybe 20 feet away from my campsite, to which I was glad, but I honestly don't even know what to even think. This story still lingers in the back of my mind every now and then, thinking what or who could have possibly been around that campsite. I didn't even tell anyone about this, and I still don't plan to, thinking that I would get in trouble for it or by the camp counselors back then, but I didn't tell anybody about that. But I just didn't want to share it because I thought people may think I'm crazy or insane. Well, that has never happened again, and I have not been back camping since. It's been a couple years now, almost 10 years. So I still have no idea to this day I still have questions in the back of my mind, but however, they're going to be left unanswered.